Hi, John.
Hey, Adam. How you doing?
When we met the last time, you remember this? I'm doing fine, by the way.
Yeah.
Perfect. And you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Yeah, last time we met, we're trying to figure out which Java 1 it was, but it was many Java 1s ago.
Yes. I just try to remember whether it was at Oracle time or before at some times.
I think it was Oracle time, but it was right after Oracle time, I think. Right after the Oracle acquisition of Sun. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, what was your first computer?
Haha. The Macintosh Big Mac 512K. That was my first computer.
Wow. One of the few, guests with Macintosh as the first one.
I know, right? My mom was a technical writer. She was a technical writer she was a work-from-home technical writer in the 80s. So she was doing remote work before we had internet or anything like that. And we lived up north of San Francisco in Sonoma County, and every couple of days, once a week, she would drive down to whichever contract she was working at, and she would spend a couple of days interviewing the SMEs on cassettes, and then come back up and type it all out on her Macintosh. Yep.
Where did you like software companies or?
It was everything. She did a couple of software things. She did like internal software for like a gravel company out of San Rafael, Shamrock Gravel Company. Every time we drive down from Sonoma County, we drive by the Shamrock factory there, and she'd say, "Thank you, Shamrock," because that contract basically paid for the car we were driving in. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's remarkable. So, okay, and what you did with the computer, you started to write technical documentation as well?
Me?
Yes.
I am one of the I'm one of those rare birds that got into IT and has worked at fairly high levels of fairly technical things, and I could not code my way past Hello World to save my life. I studied European studies, philosophy, history, politics, and so forth, and got into IT going through with my mom. Got into IT doing.
Wait a second. What it means is with the Macintosh, you did nothing technical, just played games.
Technical at all. I would write my short stories on the Macintosh. I would play what few games were available on the Macintosh. I believe.
You remember some titles, some games?
There were very few games. Dark Castle was the one that I remember playing and I really liked. Yeah. But
what's also interests me. You said now that you studied politics.
Yeah.
So what do you learn, or what do you do actually? So what are the topics if you studied politics?
Right. Well, I studied European history, and I can say that I'm actually working in my major because I've been living in Europe pretty much ever since I graduated college. So I studied about, I was really interested in communism, post-communism. This was, shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I was very interested in that transition. And then a couple of weeks after getting my undergraduate degree, I was on a plane heading to teach English in Central Europe, and I've basically been in and out of the area my whole life since then. Yeah.
Okay, so you really enjoyed, the study. And then you say, okay, this is my dream. Yep. You went to Europe and stayed in Europe.
Yep, stayed in Europe. And then I ended up bouncing around doing a bunch of different things. I was a music critic for a while. I tried my hand at journalism, didn't like it so much.
What music? What kind of music?
There was this place called Album City, which was basically a local version of Amazon, but just with CDs. So I basically ran the English language site on there, and so I would do reviews of various CDs that had come out, and we had a little, we tried to make it more of a cultural thing as well, centered around Prague and stuff, and so I kind of bounced around from place to place, and then finally decided.
In which countries? This is an interesting story.
No, but place to place professionally. This was always out of Prague, basically.
Okay.
So professionally.
And why Prague?
Just Prague, Brno and Prague, and then I went back to America for a while, 2011 till 2019. Yeah, we came back.
Okay, but why you picked Prague? It's an interesting choice.
I was studying Russian in university, and this was about the time of the big Russian economic collapse, post-Yeltsin collapse. And I was trying to figure out where I was going to go, and Russia was not seeming like a very, safe and stable place to go at that point in time. And I asked my Russian professor, and he said he had spent a lot of time in Prague, had a Czech wife, and he was like, "You have to go to Prague. I will do everything. I will teach you the language. I will teach you I will find you a job. I will do all of that." Right. And he didn't do much of any of that, but he did give me some phone numbers to people to call, and he gave me an old 1970s communist textbook to learn Czech with. But that was it. That set me in motion. I wrote.
So you're speaking Czech, actually?
Yeah. I speak Czech. Yeah.
And how well? I mean, is it like
I speak pretty well. I mean, not a lot of expats, learn to really master Czech, especially those who live in Prague. And I speak pretty well, although my son, who is making the transition from living in America to living here and has been learning Czech, always claims to speak better Czech than I do. But I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, this is true. So this is what I knew. It's actually remarkable. And I was in Prague several times, conferences, and I really enjoyed the city. Somehow, the old town is somehow small and cozy and nice. And it reminds me Krakow. It's a Polish city.
Yeah.
It's also similar to Prague. So if I'm in Krakow, or Kraków right now, I'm thinking about Prague. If I'm Prague, thinking about Krakow. So it's actually very similar cities. So Krakow is a little bit larger, maybe. Yeah. But and Prague is it's interesting.
Yeah, Krakow is a beautiful city as well. It's incredibly hard to get to from Prague, though. You have to drive. Like, for some reason, the train connections from here up to Krakow are really wacky for some reason.
Yeah. What's interesting, from Munich, Krakow, Posen, Gdańsk, Prague, is absolutely easy to get with airplane.
Yeah, with airplane.
Yeah. Never tried train. And interesting. So, okay, so this is what I didn't know. So as we met at Java 1, so actually spent your time in Prague already, right?
Yeah. I bounced around professionally for a while, and then finally took a job doing technical writing at Sun Microsystems on the NetBeans project.
So how you got to Sun?
One of my best friends at the time was doing technical writing for Sun, and I had done technical writing back in the States and done various other little tech jobs here and there, and I got the. It's funny, I got the offer. And then there was some mix-up with my paperwork because I didn't have a work permit yet. And they were like, well, we have to wait until you get your work permit, which back then took a long time. And then the .com crash happened. And I was sitting there waiting for my paperwork to come in going, I wonder if I'm going to actually have a job when when my paperwork finally comes in. But it was all good. Got the job and started working there. And I was there for 16, 17 years. And I tell you, every time I thought I was going to get out of there, I was like, okay, this is it. I got to go do something else. Some other opportunity would open up internally. And I mean, say what you will about the politics and the bureaucracy of working for big companies. But the nice thing about working for big companies is the ability to move laterally into different roles. So I started out as a technical writer, and then as a web admin, and then as a webmaster, not a web admin, webmaster for the NetBeans.org site, doing.
But this is quite technical, webmaster.
Yeah, I mean, webmaster for us, it was just managing on Facebook the content, and leading new design efforts if we're going to redesign things and so forth, right? It wasn't really, actually going in and doing any WordPress, coding. And then I managed a team of technical writers, and then at one point they asked me if I wanted to try my hand at being an engineering manager, which was interesting, especially since I had all these brilliant engineers reporting to me, and I didn't know how to code, and I thought that they would somehow dislike that, right? Or that people would be like, why are we working for this guy? But actually, it worked really well. What I found is that engineers much prefer a non-technical manager who admits he's not technical to a manager who maybe used to be a good coder 15 years ago and still thinks they're a good coder, even though they're not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it was, I would basically, tell them what needed to get done and so forth. And, I left most of the architectural decisions to them. And whenever there were disagreements, because I couldn't come in with my own institutional knowledge and override anybody or make a call, we always had to try and find some sort of consensus. And that worked really well for us, I think.
So you also know Roman Strobel and all the details.
Oh yeah, I know Roman and Gertjan and, all the NetBeans gang.
And the woman, she was, I met her.
Andini. Ruth Kostner. You thinking of Ruth?
Yeah, and I was at Java 1, and she was also, he interviewed me for NetBeans. I forgot her name.
Tori Wilt.
Tori, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I miss Tori. Our Tori the pirate. Yes. She was my manager, actually, my first manager at Sun Microsystems. I think she had left by then. Yeah.
So interesting for me, I was always a freelancer, but for me, Sun Microsystems was like a shiny object. Mm-hmm. I just liked the company without knowing why from the beginning. And I met you and all the other guys, Java 1. It's like, hey, everyone is nice. It's like really interesting, interesting company. Yeah, and what interests me right now, what you managed actually as a software engineer? Was it NetBeans development or what?
NetBeans. Mm-hmm. So I was in Java tools all the way up until I made the switch to my current role, where I work with mostly, at the Java runtime layer. But I was in Java tools, developer tools, and so forth. Managed NetBeans and was head of NetBeans as we went through like the Oracle acquisition, and then at a certain point switched over to working on the Oracle Visual Builder pack or Visual Builder application. I know at Oracle Open World they just had a big announce there about releasing some big stuff that we were just in the incubator phase of when I left a couple of years ago. So kudos to the team back there.
But you also work on Matisse, I guess, right?
Yeah. So when I started out at NetBeans, it was Matisse, right?
And Matisse was revolutionary.
Yeah.
So I have to say, Matisse, you could just draw a Swing application.
Yeah.
And it actually worked.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I have a long, storied, bloodied history with WYSIWYG developers and low code, and my passion as a non-technical guy in a technical field has always been, how do I make complicated technologies more accessible, with Matisse, I was just writing the docs. I mean, I wasn't involved in doing the design for that. That was the people on the Swing team and so forth. And the thing I really liked about Matisse was that it took a problem that was ridiculously difficult before, like doing Swing layout and Swing GUI, GUI layout was ridiculously difficult. It took a tools first approach to it, right? Because it was the layout manager that that Matisse used. You could code it by hand, but it was written specifically to be something that would be generated by a GUI tool, right? And it just went in, and it was like, as you said, it was really, really elegant. It's very difficult with these GUI layout managers and so forth, unless you're in a very tightly templated format. With a lot of these GUI layout managers, it's very difficult to get that kind of precision, that kind of ease of use, and then the beautiful responsive, layout repositioning and everything else on the UIs that it designed was really great. And it was really, I think, because we controlled all the edges of the problem, right? It wasn't like trying to build a GUI editor for something that's going to run inside of WebKit, somewhere else where you don't control what's in WebKit, or you have to use the APIs there. Those APIs can change, behaviors can change, and so forth. We controlled everything from the tools to the runtime layer to the components that were inside of it, and we really built it from the ground up. We said, what is the experience that we want customers to have when they use the GUIs that are produced, and what is the experience we want the designer to have to do it. And it was a huge success, and the only problem with it was that that just about the time it came out, people stopped doing Java GUIs, and Java.
What I used with Matisse for Swing for enterprise companies, and what we managed to do is we used just the UI builder to draw the UI, and then we had we implemented an interface, and from the other side we had a kind of a controller. So we separated the generated code from the implemented code, and it worked quite well. So actually, non-Java developers in a company were really successful with this approach.
Nice.
And so it worked well. So you couldn't generate everything. So we stopped with the actionlessness, but we delegated the invocation to a class, so it was testable, and this worked really well.
Right.
What I also remember at Java 1, the keynote, and I think the Matisse was presented by Tor Norby, I think, right?
You are thinking of no, I don't think Matisse was presented by Tor Norby. No, Matisse was Peter Suchomel and James Gosling on stage doing it.
Okay.
Tor Norby was the Visual Webpack, which was
okay.
Java Studio Creator, I believe. It was a standalone thing. And that was, again, low code,
Were you also involved in this project?
I was parenthetically involved with that. That was being developed out of a team led by Tor Norby and others in the Bay Area. And that was originally supposed to be a completely separate tool. It was released as a separate tool for a couple of times. It was built on the NetBeans platform. But released as a separate tool, and then eventually was brought in as the Visual Webpack inside of NetBeans, and so I remember Tor Norby on stage because the program crashed on him on stage, and he did that live debugging, changed a couple lines of code, rebuilt it, and ran it on stage, and everybody was like, oh,
But Visual Webpack was released, and after Visual Webpack, there was another tool which was never released.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it looked great. I forgot the name. And it was Visual Webpack. I just used it as well. You could use SOA or whatever with JSF. But there was another tool. I actually forgot the name. Yeah. So, Norby worked on that. And it should be revolutionary, but it was never released. And I even remember a demo, a Java 1. But I was really excited, but we couldn't test it.
I remember what that was. Gosh, the code name escapes me now.
Yeah. So I will put it to show notes.
Yeah, and Visual Webpack, I mean, the interesting thing is that, Matisse, like you said, it had that nice, crisp, separation layer between the generated code and then how people would plug in. And, the thing about these low-code tools is, you give it to a non-coder, they get as far as they can, and then they need to get a coder involved. And it's that handoff there, that intersection between the place where the low-code person reaches a wall and they have to call somebody with coding skills, and that coder needs to come in and work with it, that will define the success or failure of your product, right? Unless you're going to have a Wix or one of these website builders where you just never even allow for that at all, right? The only thing you can do is drag components around and work through a property sheet, But if you're building anything enterprisey, right, you're going to need to have some logic. You're not just not just showing a menu or a price list for a yoga studio or something, and it's very very, very difficult to do that in a WYSIWYG style. So you're going to need to bring in somebody who's going to do some coding in whatever language it is, and it's really that interface there that I think defines whether or not you'll be successful. We had Visual Webpack, again, some people might call it a failure. I mean, at the end, it did go out, but we had an enormous amount of people using it, and that's it's also interesting. I think. The main reason Visual Webpack and Creator failed was because it was all based on a JSP. JSP component set, and then the world moved on to JavaScript, right?
Or JSF. There was also JSF. You had your own, your own component model. I forgot the name. There was a Sun, component model.
Yeah, it was all based on that JSF component model, and then the world kind of moved on. Stateful, stateful Java 2 EE serving up JSFs was no longer how we did things, and for a very good reason. But even along the way, I thought it was, if I looked at our usage stats, we had a ton of people using it. And there's something about these WYSIWYG tools. I mean, they always leave you wanting more. But there's this great democracy effect of allowing a lot of people to kind of get in, and either people who know the language to generate a lot of stuff very easily, or people who know the language to be able to split concerns, and say, okay, I can set up a group of non-coders or non-technical people with the right templates and the right, and the right component sets and the right, basic designs. They can build out all the stuff they want, and I'll just come in to hook it up in the background. So, we saw a lot of people doing that. And then, and it's interesting. It's a very tough nut to crack. And you always see people trying it, getting VC funding, and then, kind of drying up a year or two later. But, OutSystems is out there. They're doing it very, very well, right? I worked on Oracle Visual. I actually was designed and built from the ground up. It was the first time I designed and built a product from the ground up. It was a great experience. I have scars though to prove it. But
what you did actually, because if you're not that technical, so it was like, you said, from my perspective, it has to work, this and this way.
Right.
And the engineers try to achieve that.
Yeah. So I mean, at the Oracle Visual Builder project, I was director of engineering, and we didn't really have a lot of product managers. So I was a 2-in-1 director of engineering and product owner. So it was basically me and a couple of engineers sat down and designed the initial interface and the initial approach to data binding and so forth, which at the time I thought was really cool. And then, I just led the implementation of it and acted basically as the PM. And as a matter of fact, at a certain point, I went ahead and transitioned from managing engineering directly into just being product management, and that's how I got into product management, which is what I still do today. Yeah. So there are various people out there that are doing WYSIWYG and having great success at it, and I mean the biggest example of that is Salesforce, right? I mean this. Salesforce and Apex and their ability to allow business users to customize pages without having to make at least simple customizations without having to get engineering involved was one of the many factors in their success. Having said that, if you talk to anybody who has to do a whole lot of Apex programming or programming, doing real programming inside of the Salesforce platform, they're not super happy. But there's a lot of money in it, so you do it.
But this is always the problem. Even the story of orchestration, ESBs, and was always a little bit problematic because what you also have to do is when you write the code, the tool has to be able to read it again.
Yeah.
And this was the problem, how to move forward,
Yeah.
The clean separation between generated code and implemented code.
Well, exactly. I mean, we had that at that was one of the main questions that we had to answer over at Oracle was, you're building, you design this nice designer, it saves everything to some sort of metadata, that's JSON or XML or whatever, right? And what you want is you want the user to never have to, to look into that metadata. The last thing you want is to build a framework where people are going to have to go author their UIs in like JSON metadata by hand, right? That's not what you want, right? So you build these nice designers and then you save it down to some sort of format like JSON and so forth, and that's all good and well. And you say, hey, well, guess what? You're never going to have to look under this, but then how do you work on a team as it? How do you branch it? How do you deal with, merge, and at the end of the day, it just becomes, well, we got to put these JSON files under Git, and then, okay, fine. But now when it's time to merge from one branch to another and you got, conflicts, how am I going to know what to accept and what to not accept? So, it's very tough. Different people have taken different approaches to it. But I think, once you try and move past hey, I'm one person building, 2 pages of a an Excel spreadsheet replacement, and I'm just working by myself and it's all very easy to, hey, we're a team of 5 people working on an app in this thing. Things get very, very complicated very quickly.
Another challenge is testing, right?
Yeah,
how
and
to
then
test
there's
the thing.
testing, right? So how do you do the testing and so forth? How do you then, come in to when you do need to write business logic, right? How do you write your tests for that business logic, but also how do you do, even unit tests, not unit tests, but functional tests of the generated UIs? Is it even possible, and so forth?
What
And I
worked the
do
best
think
in the Matisse project, what we did is that for every text field in the UI, we had a pair of methods like get and set, and they were in an interface, and the interface was implemented by a controller, by us. And we could actually start this interface in a unit test. Interesting part is we read Excel with the data and passed the data to the controller. And this is what people really liked, because we got, the Excel sheets from the business department, and it was very accessible to non-coders.
Nice.
And so this was actually nice. And what happened, sometimes Matisse become corrupt, so it didn't work, but usually just one view. So they quickly redraw the Matisse front end and only had to implement the interface again, and it still worked.
Nice.
So this worked actually surprisingly well. It was 10 years ago, I guess.
Right. I mean, obviously, a lot of people might balk at that workflow, like, oh, you have to, redraw the thing when it goes bad. But with Matisse, redrawing that interface was like a matter of 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
exactly.
so easy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
So what we have right now is a full circle. So what I hear more often is low code still, no code is coming back. And server-side rendering, actually, right? So the SPA and PWA is no more that, interesting. So people try to render everything on the server. So I'm just waiting, for actually JSPs coming back. JSF, I don't believe, but JSP could actually work because, they're stateless. They're extremely fast.
Bring EJBs back too?
They are already back. No kidding. So last year, I delivered a workshop, like I explained AWS Lambda, and I used EJB model for it, and it's almost identical.
Yeah.
So if you know EJBs, the same concepts apply to serverless AWS Lambda, almost identical. There's one difference: EJBs were thread based, and Lambda is process based. But if you pick Java developers and explain them, so this is crazy, but it's very 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 similar. In the podcast with Jakub Jenkov, we had a discussion about that, and I explained him this was really one-to-one relation. So, preventing of cold start with min pool size. Right. Then you have a bulkheads with max pool size, and so it was. And you should not store, anything in local file store. This is if you are a good EJB developer, you are a stellar serverless developer as well.
Right.
Cloud native solution architect then.
Everything that was old is new again. Yeah, it's a trip. When we were developing, low code, the promise of it is just always so, so there. You've got all these business units that are just starving for, I just need this little thing here. I just need this little thing there. And then you've got centralized development departments that are like, get out of town. Your request is like so far down my list of priorities that it's never going to happen. And, people just starving for like, there was just a way we could do it, just do it a little bit ourselves. It's incredibly difficult to get right, and you have to like change your business processes if you're going to want to make that available. So mostly, a lot of the tools are all based around, can we get business users to understand and consume a REST API, right? And it's interesting because different people have different ideas about who that business user that's going to be using that interface is. People think that your head of marketing is gonna use that interface. Well, no, your head of marketing is generally not going to understand REST. The internals of REST API, or be able to parse a REST, no matter how good of drag and drop. I'm mapping this field in the JSON payload to this, field on my client model and so forth. There's just, you need somebody technical, but maybe not like a full stack developer. I mean, that's the whole point, right? I think most departments have somebody who's got some technical skills, can do some scripting, can do something. I mean, just look at, Oracle Apex and how long that's gone just allowing people to build web APIs by just leveraging their PL SQL skills.
Even I used once Oracle Forms.
Right. Even
it was also worked well enough.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Do you know how many legacy Oracle Forms applications there are in the world? A lot. A lot of legacy Oracle Form applications.
And what I also see, that the data is moving closer to a database. So it's also a trend that I wouldn't be surprised that, these stored procedures are back. They are not called stored procedures anymore. There could be a GRAL VM functions in Java, and they run inside of Oracle and do something. And
Right.
so this is the first one. And the second one, we get edge computing, on the edges. And then we can get, their data living here and access something there. But the challenge is, how to coordinate this, because the data is split across several regions or worldwide. So it's really hard to coordinate. But this is also interesting movement. Regarding these low-code bags, so to this, I think the main problem is the amount of visual clues, or how to call it, the amount of arrows you need to implement a mapping. So you mentioned this visual builder, and what I remember, the visual builder was also possible to do a SOA for mappings. And if you even simple things, you have two objects, and I would like to map, the fields. So in shortest amount of time, you get your 10, 20, 30 arrows. And for coders, and I would even say for non-coding person, it would be in one point of time maybe even easier, to use a good code editor instead of drawing the arrows, because they're really hard.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you get carpal tunnel syndrome using some of those GUI, those drag and drop WYSIWYG, tools. Especially you've got a big, JSON payload that you need to map like 50 fields or 70 fields to local client model, or doing some SOA processing, right, where you're doing some server side rules where you're, gonna take some information in, run some function over it, and then, pop it out to something else. Yeah, definitely. You get a lot of pointing, a lot of clicking, a lot of, what if my connection drops? I just lost a bunch of work. I mean, there's lots of things there to have to look at. And I remember, when we, NetBeans always, if I look at how NetBeans evolved and how, IntelliJ evolved, right? NetBeans always bet on the, let's democratize, let's, bring people in who maybe don't have the skills to code every single thing and so forth. And IntelliJ just said, editor, right? It's the editor. I mean, they got other stuff around there, but it was just make the world's best editor, hands down. And they've been able to do very strong business in a field that we all thought was completely commoditized 10, 15 years ago. Nobody thought you could charge for tools anymore, right? We thought that, IntelliJ, well, they're this nice little, boutique niche, business over here, and they'll get some people who have lots of money, mostly, but mix of really strong execution on their engineering side, and a really smart business model, and distribution model. Hats off to them. I think anybody who's tried to make money in developer tools over the last 15 years knows how almost completely impossible it is. And most people just try and tread water until somebody buys them.
Why I like NetBeans, actually, one of the reasons is, first there were no plugins to install. I can download NetBeans and just go. So this was, I'm a consultant, so incredibly important for my projects. The second thing is, you had basically two shortcuts. Command dot, I think, or Alt enter, and Command space. With that, you can achieve 80% of everything. So this was a huge deal, because I went into projects. There were fresh Java developers. Okay, take this. This is two shortcuts, and here we go. IntelliJ is the opposite, and I'm actually surprised that this is so powerful, or so popular, not powerful, because I know lots of developers using IntelliJ. But they don't even know a lot of shortcuts.
Yeah, I know.
So they're using the IntelliJ, but they are not really using this. And so I ask, I don't like such a thing. So because if I use a tool, I will really use it, right?
Right.
And the next thing is, many developers use, the Eclipse bindings or Emacs binding in IntelliJ. And the IntelliJ bindings are really hard to remember. And actually, once I was at the conference and I asked the developers, So I think delete was like Command Y or something. And I say, why it is Command Y? And they told me because it's from Russian.
Yeah.
This Y stands for, I forgot the name. This is like U. And this means, so, okay, now I got it. Because, I think in NetBeans, it was Command E is erase. I could remember. Eclipse was Command D, delete, no problem.
Yeah.
IntelliJ, I think, was something with Y. It's like, why Y? Why Y, right? And I didn't want it. And the feedback, John, from developers, why you not change, the bindings? No problem. But the problem is, if I change the binding and I'm in a project with other developers, we cannot share, the IDE. So what I really appreciate using the out-of-the-box experience has to be good enough, and maybe I can customize some specific things. Mm-hmm. And right now, for instance, I do a lot of web and Java as well, and I use Visual Studio Code a lot, and it's gaining momentum like crazy. So I was 2 weeks ago in a conference, and I asked developers, web developers, who knows WebStorm? No one. Everyone used Visual Studio Code. So they say, okay, we don't know it. So this was actually crazy. Yeah. In the shortest amount of time, how Visual Studio Code took off, and even companies like Oracle, there's GraalVM plugins. Right. I'm using the Quarkus plugin. Microsoft contributes Java plugins, which is crazy. Yeah. So I really like it. But having said that, I tried NetBeans 15, and NetBeans 15 is crazy fast. Yeah. So if you use Visual Studio Code, it is a little bit laggy, but NetBeans is super fast. Right. So this is actually interesting.
Well, the interesting thing is, I know that for the scripted languages, for the Pythons and the JavaScripts and the HTML and so forth, a lot of people are using those. I don't think you can get proper Java code completion, though, and like error highlighting and so forth inside of Visual Studio Code.
I use it all the time. No problem.
Yeah? Really?
Yeah, really. So you have to download the Microsoft Java runtime, and the Microsoft Java runtime includes the Red Hat runtime.
Okay.
And you get, run tests, go to test, generate tests, refactor, getters and setters, constructor, rename. So I would say,
will it highlight errors like compilation?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
And what I do, the cool story is I use Maven a lot. So this is I go to a folder and say code -n dot, and it opens Visual Studio Code in the folder, and everything is recognized.
Wow. Yeah. I do like that. Yep.
Yeah, this is what I like. I can even open if a script, for project. I can switch between project and just opens 5 Visual Studio Code windows per module 1 window, and it's more like editor. But Control-Shift, backtick, and it opens terminal. And in the terminal, in Visual Studio Code, I can run Maven and click on the arrows, and I can switch to editor.
Yeah.
So I would say you have to try it if you have something to do with Java, because Visual Studio Code support is getting better and better. It is incredible.
And it's funny because we talk about that as like, wow, cool, but this is functionality we had in all the IDEs, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But it is very interesting that the rise of Visual Studio Code, even for those, I did not know that you could get the Java code completion and the error highlighting and those things. How about refactoring? Does it do refactoring yet?
Yes. Okay. And this is similar to NetBeans. It is command and dot. And this is like, the Os Alt Enter NetBeans. So it suggests things. So you can create a field, can extract constant, rename, delegate. So I would say whatever I need is already there. But it's there for 2 years or longer.
Okay.
And what I do, if you like, go to my YouTube channel. There are YouTube shorts, and I do everything with Visual Studio Code.
Cool. All
yeah.
Right,
so like, it's interesting. And why I use Visual Studio Code, not because, it is better than Visual Studio, IntelliJ or NetBeans. The reason is I also have to do something JavaScript work, with JavaScript and lit HTML web components, so I can use the same tool for both.
Yeah, I remember we had, we're always trying to provide the poor man's code completion and error highlighting and so forth for JavaScript, which is always very difficult because not static.
I was to test in HTML5, I remember. I had to test something for HTML support in NetBeans.
Yeah. I remember when we did our HTML5, our HTML5 stuff. And again, back then we kind of tried to do the, more integrated thing where we built, the equivalent of, Google, the Chrome code tools, the Chrome inspector and so forth into NetBeans, thinking that, wouldn't it be cool if you could like control what's happening in the browser directly from your coder, and as you're coding things, the browsers just update and so forth, and got some eyeballs on that, but then it became very hard to maintain, and people just, I mean, CDT, Chrome Developer Tools, just became the standard. I mean, just everybody just worked in Chrome Developer Tools, and so once you get to a place where a certain technology, a certain tool, or whatever is just gained dominance, it's best to just cut bait and try to fit in and complement that tool as much as possible. You try and match it feature for feature. Even if you were successful, you probably wouldn't get a lot of mind share, just because those things just start taking a life of their own.
What I'm really curious is, I don't know whether you heard about Fleet. This is the new IDE from IntelliJ. It's written in Kotlin. And it looks like a little bit like Visual Studio Code.
Okay.
So I'm really curious how it gets adopted by the current IntelliJ developers.
Right.
And what is the differentiator to Visual Studio Code? So you really have to look at this.
Right.
It's called Fleet.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. Yep.
So what you're doing right now, still low code?
Right. Nope. I went from low code all the way over to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I'm down inside the internals of the JVMs now. I work for Azul Systems, and I am doing leading product management for our highly optimized builds of OpenJDK called Azul Platform Prime, and for the cloud native compiler, which is some very cool new functionality that I think has the potential to change a lot how we deploy Java in the cloud. But yeah, so I went from low code front end citizen developer tools to the internals of the JVM and garbage collectors and JIT compilers and so forth. It's been a great switch, though. I mean, with so many of it really feels like Sun, in this company. A lot of the old Sun developers here, but also just that culture of very, engineering-led developments, trying to solve really hard problems, but do so in a way that really provides a lot of business value for people. That's all really good. And after working at, I talked about the good thing about working for a big company is that you get lots of opportunities. The bad thing for working at a big company is that, the company's trying to do 5,000 things at once, and it's hard to get synergy between everybody. It's very nice to be working at a place where everybody in the company has got one goal in mind, and that's just to make the world's best Java runtimes, and everybody's pulling the oars in the same direction. It's quite nice.
What I'm doing right now, I try to look it up because I wrote a blog post. I cannot find it anymore. What Azul did back then, they had a real hardware.
Yeah.
They had a real hardware.
Oh, back in the day? Yeah. Azul used
they were
to
like,
have, we started
what was the name of the hardware?
Yeah.
You know?
It was, I want to say Velo, but that's not.
No. It was V something. I think it was V. And I cannot find my own blog post, which is
long ago. It was a specialized Java servers with a special Java runtime on it, mostly for financial trading institutions, which is where Azul kind of made its chops early on.
Because it looked beautiful, the machine. And I blog about this. I was at Java 1, and I saw the machine. There was like host with 50 CPUs. It was incredible back then.
Right.
It was like, larger than anything else. And I was really stunned. Like, wow, there's another company at Suntime, which, has hardware. Right. And then you started with Azul. And actually, I use Zulu in projects a lot to support it. Yeah, right. I'm using this a lot. And you said that the Prime will do a huge impact in cloud. Why this?
Yeah. So Zulu, we've got two, what we do is we make Java runtimes. And so when it comes to Java, the Zulu builds of OpenJDK were really the best supported builds of OpenJDK for a long time. I mean, Adopt OpenJDK kind of got lost in the forest a little bit for a while. And, with their TCK problems with Oracle and so forth. And Azul was really killing it with Zulu, getting that out there, and also selling support for it. So companies that wanted to reduce their support bill could go from paying Oracle to paying Azul. And so Zulu was very big. It was the default JVM for GitHub Actions. It was the default JVM.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And it was the default JVM for for Microsoft Azure before they decided that they wanted to start doing their own builds of OpenJDK.
But GitHub Action is huge.
Yeah. For GitHub, we got massive usage from GitHub. Now it's no longer the default. Now you can choose which one you want and stuff. It used to be the only way you could do it, and then for a while, and then so now you can. There's more control inside of GitHub about which JDK you want to run your actions on. But yeah, I got a lot of usage through that. So that is just like core is just like it's just OpenJDK. Its whole value prop is that it is exactly the same in every way as OpenJDK. We do some stuff like we have packages with JavaFX in it and so forth, but Prime on the other hand is OpenJDK, right? We take the OpenJ code base. It's not like it's a green room implementation or it's an alternative implementation like GraalVM is. It's OpenJDK, but then we just take out certain components and we replace them with more optimized versions of them. And yeah, it's kind of funny. I think paradoxically, these days there's more JDK versions to choose from than there ever has been. You've got Corretto, you've got you've got Corretto, you've got Microsoft's builds, you've got Temarin builds, you've got Zulu, of course, Azure has their own builds of OpenJDK, you got Oracle, of course, and there's so many builds, and then you've got GraalVM and so forth, and paradoxically, I think the more builds there are, the more people seem to think, oh well, just Java's just all the same, right? Because so many of those builds really are just vanilla repackaging of OpenJDK, and people, but there are, and here I'm thinking specifically GraalVM and Prime, there are, JVMs that actually are materially better, measurably better in certain aspects of how they run. And, one of the ways that it's better is just speed. We just, your workload will just run fast.
So what's the difference between Zulu and Prime?
So Prime basically takes OpenJDK, which is Zulu, right? And we swap out the JIT compiler for our LLVM-based JIT compiler, which is called Falcon. And then we swap out the garbage collector for our C4 pauseless garbage collector. And, we were the first ones to really solve, garbage collection pauses, stop the roll garbage collection pauses. And we've had that in production for JDK 8 and JDK 11 for a long time. Now there's there's of course ZGC and Shenandoah coming to market, and really, starting to mature and become usable. And the latest I saw that ZGC just released the proposal for generational support in ZGC. So kudos to the ZGC team. I know that's a huge step there for them. We're very happy to see pauseless garbage collection becoming mainstream. And we've been in that game for quite a long time. And so yeah, what we're trying to do is, and then so consistency of execution, eliminating outliers, eliminating hiccups and pauses and so forth. When you've got an SLA that says everything needs to return in 100 milliseconds, or even more extremely, if you're a financial trading institution where like every nanosecond is money, then having that consistent execution and not getting big outliers when you do stop the roll garbage collection is a big deal. Just faster code. So our LLVM based JIT compiler just produces code that is just materially, faster and by a lot, like 20 or 40% faster than the hotspot code. And then the last one is like the warm up characteristics. And, when you're warming up, you go through the regular cycle of, I don't know, to me, Java is kind of like that guy from Memento. He's like, he wakes up and he goes, "Whoa, what am I doing now? I guess I'm doing this thing. I have no idea what this is. What is it? It's Kafka? I'm running Kafka. Okay. Well, let me run it in the interpreter for a little bit and see what's hot, and and then I'll start kind of compiling those things. Even though that not that JVM because it's probably a container, but even though that system has run that program thousands of times. There's probably another 300 nodes running that exact same program. It should have long-term memory. It should know, like, oh, you're running Kafka. I know what methods you need to be hot for you. I know how, what optimizations I should be providing. And so we have a Ready Now project that does just that. It saves the profiling information from when you're warming up an application, and then other VMs can load from that, can front load all this stuff, so you can skip the whole interpreter and profiling stage of the application and front load as many of those optimizations right up front, jump right into it. And then the other thing that gives you is, because things get hot at the beginning, right? They get optimized, but maybe at the beginning you were doing a bunch of application loading, and getting set up, and you get all these optimizations, and then you get 10 minutes into the run, and now you see something different. You get a DOps storm, and you have to re-optimize all that stuff, and that affects performance.
But you are pretty technical, I have to say. No.
Huh?
You are very technical.
I've been down in the guts of the JVM. It has been the biggest challenge of my professional career, and it's been the most fun of my professional career, for sure.
I didn't want it to ask two technical questions, but what you are explaining right now is crazy. So
yeah. So not bad for an old poli-sci major, huh? And,
this is very good, actually.
Yeah. So by profiling the application throughout the whole life of the application, we can see that, which optimizations you actually needed for your steady state. And so we can load those up at the beginning so that you don't get those DOps storms. So it's really interesting because, when you apply those things to, okay, so that's nerdy technical stuff. Those are cool technologies. But why does a customer care, right? And so when you approach something like, total cost of ownership, and people's AWS bills and cloud bills just blowing up right now, and everybody's just trying to get things under control. So you look at the total cost of ownership of something, it's the way that you can combine things. So let's take, for example, what we can do with Cassandra. So we were looking at Cassandra, and we were like, okay, so with Cassandra, let's figure out which configuration, and we're going to test all the configurations. We're going to test all the garbage collectors, including the new garbage collectors. Which configuration can just get the most throughput through a JVM at one time, right? And so, we did them all, and we found that, Prime, of course, got the most because of our JIT compiler provides such better optimized code. But so when we looked at, looking at Cassandra and we testing all the various configurations of it, we were looking at, okay, so which, configuration can we get just the most throughput through a VM of a certain size? And we saw, I think it was G1, right? Got the, after Prime, of course, because Prime got the best with our JIT compiler, was G1.
What is the difference actually in throughput? So what is the difference between stock OpenJDK and the highest optimized Prime?
Well, it depends which workload you're working on, but I think our Renaissance workloads, we see about 53% faster code. Kafka, we see 45%. Solar, we see about 35%. And then with Cassandra, we didn't just do a straight throughput thing. I mean, on our straight throughput, we saw... we got 115,000 ops per second.
Wow.
And the next best was CMS with 83,000 ops per second. Now, but the thing is, that's just pedal to the metal, full saturation, right? Just how much can you get through that with not looking at all at what your response times are, and nobody runs like that, right? So what people say is, look, I've got this Cassandra app and all my queries need to respond within 100 milliseconds. And then you try and figure out, okay, so how hard can I push one of these VMs before I have to start spinning up some additional ones to add different load? And if you looked at response latencies, whereas just straight throughput CMS gave you the best throughput, it actually gave you the worst response latencies as far as your max, your variance in response latencies. So what we did is we developed this testing framework called Tussle, and which stands for Throughput Under Service Level Expectations. We wanted to call it Tussle, but we thought that a certain
this could be some problems.
So and that's a framework that basically what it does is it says, okay, first let me test what's your max, what's the top that I can get through your system, right? And then it sets that as the top max, and then it goes back and it says, okay, now tell me what your SLA is, right? And now I'm going to take like, I'm going to start at like 20% of your max. And then
how does tell me work? Is this like a custom switch on JDK level?
What's that?
You said tell me. What does this mean? Tell me. Tell me is like a custom switch on JDK.
Oh, no. So what you want to say is that what you want the benchmark to tell you is
okay.
So what you want the benchmark to tell you is how much can I get through this configuration while still maintaining my SLA. So the benchmark first finds your max where you're not doing any kind of response time. That's just the total. And then it starts at like 30% of that, and then 40% of that, and 50% of that. And it just increments it, and it tries to run it, and it just shows, was I able to meet that SLA? If I was, I'll try the next step. If I wasn't, I'll stop there. And, when you look at that, like 100 millisecond response SLA, CMS, which was the best at throughput, couldn't maintain a 100 millisecond max, like 99.9 percentile, couldn't maintain it even at the lowest levels, even at 20K, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it's really interesting. And then you can really go into like this holistic thing where you're like, okay, how can I start changing things? Maybe things like instead of...
I have a question because I would like to tell you something. So first the question, because you are somehow technical already.
Yeah.
So CRaC, right?
Huh?
The coordinated restart at checkpoint.
Yeah, CRaC. Yeah, we love Java on CRaC.
Yeah, so you are somehow involved with CRaC.
Yeah. We're definitely looking at CRaC. It's a very exciting opportunity, I think.
Because CRaC is the solution to the problem you said, right? So what Java will do, it will store a checkpoint.
Right.
Yeah.
So CRaC, CRaC is a little bit different. Here we're talking about like different levels that you can go up as far as being able to scale your application, and also storing. It's similar to CRaC in that.
That is the reference to Memento, you said,
Yeah,
if you mention Memento. So I thought about CRaC, it's like, but I will wait with CRaC. Maybe you don't know about CRaC, but...
Yeah. So Ready Now, what it does is it stores the profiles, and then it makes you like redo the compilations. You just know which compilations they are, and so forth. So
and what I understand from Azul is that you have prepared optimizations for popular workloads, so I can load the workload and don't have to optimize, right? This is what
we're trying to get to. Yeah. I mean, what we want to do is kind of crowdsource the optimizations, as far as, but, even like getting to, delivering a pre-baked image with some, the actual optimizations you will eventually end up with are always based on what usage patterns you're seeing. And those are going to vary from use case to use case. Yeah. Even if you're using like just Kafka or just Cassandra, the way one person uses Cassandra is going to be different than the way another person uses Cassandra. It's going to lead to different optimizations. But you could provide a baseline, that would be a semi-warm JVM that people could jump into, and then it would base on it. Or the other thing you could do is you could use something like CRaC, which takes a checkpoint of the entire state of the process. And then you could take that checkpoint anywhere. You could wait until like after main, you've got everything warmed up, snapshot it there, export that snapshot, and then bring up more JVMs from that one snapshot, and you'd be jumping right into that with a very low amount of time. The only thing about CRaC is that we need to, it does require some changes to your application, because anything that is state that needs to be saved and then rehydrated, you have to implement those things with a certain code pattern and so forth. But the good news is we've already got Quarkus has accepted our CRaC patch, so that you can run Quarkus on CRaC and reconstitute those apps. I think Micronaut is coming soon, I believe. So we're getting good traction. But still early days there. We've proposed an OpenJDK project for it, which is getting some acceptance, and yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's definitely resonating with people who are just they're trying to use Graal native image and they just can't.
Are you also working on native image, on the cross, or are you also working on native?
No, this is not a precompiled image. This is a profile it's a snapshot of the
no, but is it possible to use no native image with Zulu, or you say we are not working on it?
No. That's GRAL. So the Zulu and Prime are both just straight OpenJDK builds. Even with GRAL now going into OpenJDK, we're not currently looking at that.
Some interesting. I use the JVM on serverless AWS Lambda, and the interesting part is if you use now the JVM with the JIT, the execution gets faster and faster. So you don't have to pay usually for the cold start, or you pay for the half, and then it is actually cheaper than GraalVM. This is why I was curious, because whatever you mentioned is what it will mean is actually the execution time is going to be faster, and I have plenty of memory anyway, because to run AWS Lambda, I have to buy with memory the CPU. So we usually have 1.7 gigs of RAM to have one CPU.
Yeah.
And then you can actually save money because you are paying for gigabyte second. So this was really interesting. What you said. This is why I'm asking now.
Yeah.
What I also found super interesting is, because I was curious about the native image, that the your Zulu Prime, because it's based on LLVM, you have a nice native integration. So you can actually integrate native code internally, which also is, I had the problem several times in my projects, because we have some libraries which you have to integrate. And this looks also interesting, because LLVM is the entire Apple chain, is also based on LLVM.
Right.
So maybe it could be even possible to call Swift or whatever from Azul.
Ooh, yeah. I should look into that.
Yeah, you should.
Straight from Zulu, from Prime.
Because Swift is also LLVM. There's no reason not to use it, and the entire chain is LLVM. So
yeah.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Where people can find you now?
And I'm in Prague. If you're in Prague, come by and have a drink. You can also look me up, jcheckearly1 on Twitter, and if you want to learn more about our products, come to azul.com.
Or Fuji, I guess.
Or Fuji, yeah. We got a lot of stuff on Fuji as well. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It was really nice to meet you again after 10 plus years.
Great chatting for sure. I hope to run into you at a conference sometime soon.